Israeli warplanes continue to shell the Gaza Strip on Wednesday, destroying residential buildings and killing more and more Palestinians. The diplomatic efforts for a ceasefire remain stalled despite international calls to end more than a week of Israeli airstrikes. Gaza medical officials say that at least 221 Palestinians have been killed, including 63 children, and more than 1,530 wounded since the bombardment began on the 10th of May. The number of people who have been displaced by Israel's ongoing offensive on the Gaza Strip has soared to over 58,000. Children are being subjected to extensive trauma in Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip. Some is trauma they've seen repeatedly throughout their short lives. Nearly 450 buildings in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed or badly damaged, including 6 hospitals and 9 primary care health centres. The bloodshed in Gaza were preceded by days of tension and Israeli aggression in occupied East Jerusalem, where hundreds of Palestinians were assaulted by Israeli forces at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel also threatened the eviction of dozens of Palestinian families in the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood.
لأجلك يا مدينة الصلاة أصلي لأجلك يا بهية المساكن يا زهرة المدائن يا قدس يا قدس يا قدس يا مدينة الصلاة أصلي عيوننا إليك ترحل كل يوم ترحل كل يوم تدور في أروقة المعابد تعانق الكنائس القديمة وتمسح الحزن عن المساجد عيوننا إليك ترحل كل يوم ترحل كل يوم تدور في أروقة المعابد تعانق الكنائس القديمة وتمسح الحزن عن المساجد يا ليلة الإسراء يا درب من مروا إلى السماء عيوننا إليك ترحل كل يوم
Violence in Israeli-occupied East Jerusalem continues nightly, with Israeli police injuring hundreds of Palestinians. But what's behind it? Our following infographic explains. Susie Eshkuntana, the 7-year-old girl who was pulled out alive from debris after several hours following an Israeli airstrike, is still suffering severe trauma and shock. But hospitals are unable to get her the psychological treatment she needs because of the ongoing offensive.
Susie Eshkuntana hardly speaks or eats. It's been 2 days since the 7-year-old girl was pulled from the rubble of what was once her family's home, destroyed amid a barrage of Israeli airstrikes. She spent hours buried in the wreckage as her siblings and mother died around her.
We admitted her into the hospital and really she was still in shock. She is in shock all the time. She refuses to speak, eat or drink because I think she has lost many members of her family. Even with her father beside her, I think she will still be tired. Today she's better, but she's still in shock.
Children are being subjected to extensive trauma in Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip. For some, it's trauma they've seen repeatedly throughout their short lives. The Eshkuntana family was buried under the rubble of their home early Sunday after massive bombing raids of downtown Gaza City. The strikes came without warning. Father Rashid recounted how he was buried for 5 hours under the wreckage, pinned under a chunk of concrete, unable to reach his wife or 5 children. After he was rescued and taken to the hospital, family and staff hid the truth from him as long as they could, learning about their deaths one after another. Finally, Susie was brought in alive, the second oldest of his 3 daughters and 2 sons, and the only survivor.
I heard the voice of my children from beneath the rubble calling on me. I heard my child's voice calling, "Dad, Dad," before he suddenly became silent, and I lost his voice. He is 2.5 years old, and my daughter was calling on me, "Dad, Dad." A few words, then silence. I consider them martyrs for the sake of Allah.
I'm now joined live from Madaba in Jordan by Palestinian commentator Dr. Azam Tamimi. Dr. Tamimi, thank you for joining me again here today on The Edge. Sadly, the situation in Gaza certainly hasn't got any better. In fact, it's getting much worse. What is your reaction to the latest situation?
Well, indeed, you are right. It's getting worse simply because Israel is not sparing anything in Gaza in the hope of, I think, turning the people of Gaza against the resistance. As if Israel is saying to the Palestinians of Gaza, blame it on your leaders, blame it on those who decided to start this confrontation. And until you do that, and until they stop, we're going to continue to massacre you. We will continue to bomb your houses and destroy your lives. But one thing that Israelis don't seem to understand or don't seem to have learned from past experiences is that this is hardly the way the people of Gaza think, or the people of Palestine anywhere think. Because for them, this is destiny. It's your destiny to put up resistance, to struggle, until you get back your freedom and dignity, or better die decently. After all, as Muslims, they believe they're dying for a noble cause, and if they die, they are martyrs. And if they live to see their dignity regained.
In fact, if that is the political objective of Benjamin Netanyahu, then it's sorely, totally missing the mark, as if anything, it's not only gelling the Palestinians to be stronger together, to make they become more united. Yesterday we saw the strikes across the whole of the territories, and also around the world we're seeing tremendous revulsion against what is happening particularly in Gaza.
Indeed, I still vividly remember the confrontations of 2009, 2012, and 2014, and I see something different this time. I see unanimity. I see historic agreement among Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Palestine 1948, and in the diaspora, simply because they're waking up to realize that nothing pleases the Israelis. There is nothing the Israelis can be content with. They took part of Palestine. They took the second part of Palestine. They want more land. They want more houses. Now they want the mosque. They want the neighborhoods in Jerusalem one by one. And they keep favoring their Jewish settlers over the indigenous population. So where do we go from here? It's inevitable that this conflict will continue to regenerate.
Do you think that there may be a sea change coming outside of the geography? I mean, around the world. Last week, the United Nations Security Council, except for the veto of America, had a statement prepared. Even in America now, we're seeing just today a number of members of the House of Representatives calling for the arms that are being sent to Israel from America to be stopped. Is there a political change outside of the geography?
Well, definitely there are some changes, but they are not yet enough to bring pressure to bear on this extreme right-wing government in Israel. But still, the most important change that the Palestinians need to see happen is a change in the neighborhood, in the Arab countries that surround them. Because without the green light given to Israel, wittingly as well as unwittingly by these Arab governments, Israel would not have dared do what it's been doing, whether in Jerusalem or in Gaza. See, there are 6 Arab governments that have full diplomatic relations with Israel, and none of them has even threatened to suspend, let alone sever, those diplomatic and political ties. Right. So Netanyahu says, oh, the Arabs are not bothered. Some Arab governments don't even allow their peoples to express their feelings of sympathy in favor of the Palestinians. So it's the Arab world, the conditions of the Arab world that are more favorable toward Israel until this moment.
So this is obviously a spin-off of Donald Trump's machinations in the last year. But the Arab League, I don't know, how does this fit into the equation? The Arab League has accused Israel of ethnic cleansing, saying that before colonizing people lives under the influence of an apartheid state, an occupation government that systematically practices ethnic cleansing. How does the Arab League fit into what you've just described?
Yeah, they can say whatever they want. They can continue to accuse Israel of all sorts of things. But really what matters is that the Arab League is unable to take the minimum decent action. The Arab League doesn't have the mandate or the authority to tell a country like the UAE, for instance, or Bahrain to pull their ambassadors from Tel Aviv, or to tell Morocco and Sudan to reverse normalization, or to tell Jordan and Egypt to call off their diplomatic relations with Israel, or even call on the Palestinian Authority to stop security coordination with Israel. It's really tragic what's going on. Our people are being slaughtered in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine, while the Arab League is just issuing statements. What can statements do?
Indeed, and also the IOC, the Islamic Cooperation Council, also issued statements, but from your perspective, this is just nice words over a fancy dinner.
Indeed. I mean, look at what's happening now. In the eyes of the Arabic public, from Morocco to the Gulf, Hamas is the hero today, because Hamas is leading the struggle, is leading the resistance, is leading the defiance against Israel. In Saudi Arabia, which is a founding member of the OIC and a very influential figure, Hamas members are in prison. Some of them are dying in prison simply because they are Hamas. I mean, so what can the OIC do? If the OIC cannot guarantee the release of Hamas prisoners in the Arab country that is home to the Muslims' Kaaba or Qibla, and the second holiest mosque, which is the Mosque of Medina. Again, it's really tragic.
So really, the Arabic states all need to be reading off the same page, and not to be. I imagine that some of these their unwillingness to make changes because of external pressures, for example, from the United States. In the same way that the United States is supporting Israel, they're also no.
No, I don't think so. You see, the explanation for this shameful Arab position is the fact that these Arab regimes, many of them, have found a partner in Israel in preventing change in the region, a change that the Arab masses 10 years ago rose in several Arab capitals in order to achieve, which is democracy. Both Israel and these despotic Arab governments don't want to see democracy succeed or nourish anywhere in this region. So there is an alliance, there is an existential alliance between this Zionist, racist apartheid regime on the one hand and these Arab despotic tyrant regimes on the other.
So what is the way forward? How can we? How can the Palestinians be able to break out of this vicious circle in which they're every few years they're being pushed down, and the Gaza Strip itself has been blockaded for 14 years. What is the way out to break this vicious cycle?
It's happening, by the way. It's happening gradually, slowly, but gradually. If you compare the various confrontations that I referred to from 2009 until today, definitely the Palestinians are becoming more defiant, becoming more enlightened about the essence of the conflict with Zionism. But the real breakthrough will have to come from the Arab masses. The Arab masses are still in shackles, and they need to break these shackles, because the issue of Palestine is not the issue for myself and my family and my tribe. It's an issue for all the Arabs. All the Arabs should be concerned about the fact that Palestine is occupied by this racist entity, and about the fact that their third holiest mosque is at risk of being demolished by them in order to build their own temple. So the Arabs need to wake up and need to do something about their condition.
Do you fear we've seen missile strikes from Lebanon, and Iran have also been ramping up their rhetoric in the last few days? Should the Arab nations also be afraid that this conflict could continue to escalate and spill outside of the Palestinian territories?
It would have spilled out of the Palestinian territories had it not been for the efforts made by neighboring Arab governments to protect Israel. Nobody can dare cross the borders from Syria or from Lebanon or from Egypt or from Jordan. Although people are dying to do this. People are dying to rush to the aid of their brothers in Jerusalem or in Gaza. But actually these governments are keeping the people away and preventing them. Yet this situation cannot be maintained forever. And there will be an explosion at one time. There will be an explosion at one moment.
So there's very much a powder keg sitting there in the Palestinian territories waiting to explode. This is a great risk not just to the region, but to the whole world, I'm sure.
Well, until when will the world continue to watch as Israelis persecute the Palestinians the way they have been doing? Until when public opinion around the world will remain silent when the Americans are arming Israel to the teeth and funding it, giving it money and providing it with a political and diplomatic clout? Of course, there has to happen. Something has to happen. And if an explosion happens, everybody will feel it. Everybody will probably be affected by it.
Can we expect, there have been talks of ceasefire in the background talks between Hamas and Israel, which they're both denying. There's tremendous pressure now from the governments around the world. Do you think we can expect a ceasefire anytime soon?
Eventually, of course, there have to be a ceasefire, like in previous occasions. Hamas and Israel don't talk directly to each other. There are always mediators and brokers. And I think Qatar, Egypt, probably some European elements are doing something, are trying to do something. The Americans, we hear that Biden has called Netanyahu so far 4 times to tell him this has to come to an end. Because there's enormous pressure on Biden administration at the moment, especially from Pakistan and Turkey. But Netanyahu wants first to guarantee success, or what seems to be success. He wants to remain in government, and if he is perceived as having lost the war to Hamas, most probably he won't be able to return as prime minister in Israel. So this is his concern.
Yes, so he's fighting with his political survival, literally. Well, thank you for giving us a different perspective on the broader situation and particularly the role of the Arab countries. Let's hope that they begin to consider what they should be doing sooner rather than later. Dr. Tamimi, thank you so much for joining me on The Edge. Now, while the United States backs Israeli attacks on the Palestinian people, Russia says that Israel needs to stop attacks on Gaza. What are the other international reactions on the recent situation? Our following graphic explains. Joined live from Istanbul by Dr. Mohammed Makram Balabi, who's the Director General of the League of Parliamentarians for Al-Quds. Dr. Mohammed, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. Can you tell us what is your perspective on the latest developments in Gaza?
Well, as we discussed earlier this week, when the Israeli forces stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque, it actually initiated a reaction from Gaza and all over the world. And this snowball rolled and became what we have seen in the last few days. So now the action that is taken by Netanyahu and his cronies to stay in power resulted in this another wave of violence directed to Gaza. Now we have seen hundreds of people killed, including children, women, buildings. They are bombarded and turned into rubbles. The health system already in Gaza suffers the Israeli siege for the last 15 years. People almost forgot about the COVID-19 and coronavirus, which is as deadly and lethal as the rockets and the airstrikes. And people already suffer from unemployment, lack of drinking water, flooding sewage pipes, and all sorts of tragedies. Yet they are very keen on fighting till the last breath. The Israelis, with all American support and with all their armies, navy, and air force, are trying to destroy or compel or whatever, force Gaza to surrender. And basically, the occupation is responsible for whatever has happened in the last week and for the last 50 years or so.
Can we just unpack this unfolding humanitarian catastrophe that's building in Gaza? As you mentioned, the bombing has hit infrastructure, which has broken sewerage pipes and so on. But importantly, as you mentioned, the COVID, yesterday the Al Rimal Health Clinic was bombed. Why was that clinic so important?
Basically, the Israelis, they want to put maximum pressure on the resistant movement because they know that such movements they are popular movement. They are coming from the people. And if they could put pressure on the people, then these people in their turn would put pressure on these movements. So it's an indirect way of fighting this battle. For that, they target the infrastructure, the health centers, schools, and all sorts of places with social significance.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, I believe there's now no place in Gaza where, as a result of the Al Rimal Health Clinic being targeted, there's no place in Gaza where COVID tests can be made. So this is highly significant. As well, something like 10 other hospitals and several other medical centres have been obliterated. These surely are all war crimes to hit medical centres like this.
It's not only medical centers, even media. Mm-hmm. For example, the Israelis had the building which houses main media agencies, including the Associated Press, Al Jazeera. They're not allowing international journalists to get in using all kinds of reasons. They're targeting even the Palestinian narrative on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. So it's not only the healthcare system, it's almost everything. They're targeting the Palestinians themselves. They want actually to make Palestinians so afraid to try another round of resistance as they did in 2010, 2014, and this time, 2012. So this is the main target, actually.
Well, in fact, the targeting of social media channels doesn't just stop inside Gaza, it happens around the world. Even this programme last night, our Facebook live feed was targeted, and we were taken off the air from Facebook for a short while because of this desire to stop the news, to stop the facts from getting out. So this is something that we're very much aware of. But we're back. Dr. Mohammed, the humanitarian crisis is terrible. Over 200 people killed, 60 or more children amongst that number, and yet the Israelis say that they're just defending themselves, and most of the people killed are combatants. What is the reality from Gaza? Is it civilians that are being struck, or is it, as the Israelis say, combatants?
Actually, we shouldn't take the occupation narrative seriously, because all of occupation all over the world, the narrative of colonialism is known to everyone. It is based on deceit, propaganda, and lies. So discussing such a propaganda or such a narrative is a waste of time. They have one aim only, to subdue the Palestinian people, to take their land and force them out of Palestine. Myself, I am an immigrant. My father was an immigrant. For the last 70 years, we are out of Palestine. And same story is told over and over again, and we have to find who's right, who's wrong. It is not all about that. There is a very clear-cut narrative, which is a narrative of the victim. Victim doesn't lie. It is always the victimizer who always tries to mislead people and mix truth with falsehood and to avoid punishment. And this is what has been happening for the last 70 years. With American support, Israel managed always to get away with whatever it does.
And as part of that, I want to come back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago with at the end of Ramadan, with the evictions from Sheikh Jarrah and the attacks by the Robocops on worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque. this narrative, it doesn't just start a month ago, as you just said, it goes back maybe up to 100 years. This whole problem needs to be resolved here and now, doesn't it? It's not just about stopping the bombardments on Gaza. It's a much bigger question of the Israelis illegally adding settlers to occupied territories. How is that going to happen?
The world, the United States, is not looking for a solution. As I told you earlier, maybe 2 weeks ago, Europe and the United States, they just rush to the help of Israel whenever Israel is in need. For the last maybe few months, Israel was targeting Muslims, Christians alike in Jerusalem, and nobody said anything about it. The United States actually relocated its embassy in Jerusalem, contrary to the international law. Nobody did anything about it. It's only when the Israelis came under fire, the Americans and the other governments, they are intervening. So this is this is what's happening in Palestine, actually. They rush for the help of the victimizer, not the victim.
Now, finally, tomorrow, the United Nations General Assembly has been called to meet at 10 o'clock local time, which I think will be about 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Turkey and in the Palestinian territories. This meeting is long overdue, and there are two articles that are going to be discussed. One is about the ceasefire, I believe, and the other is about the broader question. Palestine still doesn't have a seat at the General Assembly, but do you think that tomorrow's discussion may be an opportunity to change the conversation in a way which hasn't been done before?
No, actually, we have been watching this scene for the last maybe 70 years. At least in my lifetime, I've seen this scene hundreds of times. So we do not also take it seriously. There is one serious thing that's happening on the ground, is the Palestinian resistance. The level of Palestinian resistance actually made these powers convene and try to find some kind of temporary solution. But this solution is the occupation has to withdraw from the occupied land. That's it. It's not about humanitarian issues. It's not about human rights of the Palestinian people. It's about the occupation. Once the occupation is over, problem will be over.
So it's simply about the rule of law?
It's not about the law. It's about having the capability of implementing the law.
Right.
So who is capable now of implementing international law? It's only the United States, and the United States is at the side of Israel. The Biden administration actually just a few days ago endorsed something like 700 million USD weapons for the Israeli occupation. So actually they are, in a way, directly participating in the tragedy of the Palestinian people.
Is it 735? And interestingly,
exactly.
today the small group of US legislators in the House of Representatives have tabled a motion in the Congress to block that. Now, of course, that blockage won't happen, but we'll see what happens. Do you expect, very briefly, do you expect any ceasefire to come anytime soon?
Yeah, sure, because now Israelis are suffering. It's not this time, it's not only the Palestinians who are suffering, it's also the Israelis. So most probably they will reach a ceasefire very soon, maybe within the next 2 days.
And also, of course, the American politicians are also beginning to feel the pinch. Dr. Bellami, thank you so much for joining me here today on The Edge. Thank you. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the international community of turning a blind eye to Israel's aggression over occupied Palestinian territory, reiterating Turkey's strong support for the Palestinian people.
Kudüs'te, Gazze'de ve diğer tüm Filistin şehirlerinde ölen çocuklar değil, insanlığın bizatihi kendisidir.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan slammed Israel for its ongoing brutal attacks on Palestinian people.
Filistin'de yaşanan zulme var gücümüzle karşı çıkmayı sürdüreceğiz.
President Erdogan accused the international community of turning a blind eye to Israel's aggression over occupied Palestinian territory.
Dünyaya demokrasi, insan hakları, hukuk, adalet, özgürlük, güvenlik vaazı veren uluslararası kurumlar ve devletler ise bu zulmü sessizce seyrediyor.
Meanwhile, Turkey has completely rejected the U.S. Department of State's statement blaming President Erdogan for being anti-Semitic.
The concept of anti-Semitism should not be used to cover up Israel's ethnic, religious and cultural cleansing policies. We urge the U.S. administration to make efforts to stop Israel's incessant attacks on Palestinian civilians, instead of leveling false accusation on the Turkish leader.
Turkey's Jewish community has also denounced the U.S. Department of State's statement, saying that it is unfair and reprehensible to imply that President Erdogan is anti-Semitic, praising his constructive, supportive and encouraging attitude.
Güçlüyüm. Öyleyse haklıyım. Hayır, hayır. Güçlü her zaman haklı diye bir şey yok. Haklının güçlü olduğuna inandığımız bir dünyayı kurmak için Türkiye var.
And I'm joined live from Florida in the United States by political analyst Bülent Yavuz. Bülent, thank you for joining me here today on The Edge. The last 10 days we've been seeing the vicious onslaught of attacks from Israel into the Gazan, into Gaza, killing over 200 people. So far we've not seen a huge response against this from the Biden administration, but I understand Joe Biden has spoken now 4 times to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and today said that he expects a significant de-escalation. What can you tell us about the US response?
Joe Biden definitely is not happy with what's happening for a number of reasons, but the key one was that 10 days ago, right before the events started to happen in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, his policy on the Middle East was pretty clear, and it was to show a low profile and not to engage in the conflict that it has been there for ages now. However, as one of his colleagues told him that, okay, I understand that you are turning your back to the Middle East, but never forget the Middle East is not going to turn its back on you. So I guess this is what's happening, and in a very short time, he had to speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu 4 times, and that's an increasing discomfort for him because his efforts on the foreign policy that he wanted to make a strong focus in China, in Russia, in Asia. However, he's, like many of his predecessors, he's been dragged to what's happening in the Middle East for a very simple reason, actually, because that's an unjust situation against the Palestinian people. It's become chronic, and these latest events actually reveal the ugly face of injustice done to Palestinians in not only in Gaza but elsewhere in the country. One thing which is very, very new in this case is that not only the Gazans but also people from West Bank and people from Jerusalem and rest of Israel, there have been uprisings, and there's significant support actually among the Jews in worldwide, and there is a lot of sympathy. There's a lot of actually empathy, I would say, that is by many of the liberals within Israel as well. So it is not a simple black and white take your side issue anymore. It is becoming more of a humanitarian crisis, and not to mention that the events on Sunday, where Israel destroyed a tall building in Gaza, which housed Associated Press and Al Jazeera, with the justification that there is Hamas's R&D and intelligence offices over there. And then later on, Secretary Blinken himself said that, okay, we don't have any evidence. Israel did not show any evidence. All these things are actually pressuring President Biden. Many congressmen and women becoming louder as days go by.
And this is one of the very interesting changes that showed a big step forward today. As you say, the congresswomen are beginning to speak out against Israel. In fact, not just the congresswomen. I believe one or two of the senior congressmen were backing them as well. This is something unprecedented, from what I understand, in the United States, which has always been entirely pro-Israel. So why is this finally happening? Is it because of the protests around the country?
Well, one of the things that's happening is, again, there is, at least in the last 4 days, there's a substantial increase in the visibility of what's happening in Gaza. To give you an example, by Saturday, the total coverage in some of the major news outlets that are, let's say, pro-Biden or pro-Democrats, their total coverage was limited to less than 10 minutes to the whole events. But once this bombing happened, this attack to the media, the people in media started to question the validity of what's happening. That's one particular mistake, I believe, Israeli Defense Forces made. They were so overconfident about the U.S. support, probably, that they might have thought that it would not have mattered. But it didn't work out like that. So as the exposure started to happen now, it is snowballing all around the country, not only among the politicians, but ordinary people are looking at this picture in a different way. And there's a lot. I mean, it's very interesting. One of the things that I've seen is that the Jewish workers of Google, there's 250 of them, just wrote a statement to their management that they're protesting the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist approach. Okay, and that's very interesting, because they say that this is a political tactic that which must be avoided by Google and elsewhere, and it not only hurts the Palestinians but also the Jewish people all around the world. So these are some of the statements that we've never seen, never heard before. Not to mention that Jewish Americans in particular, a good number of them, and according to one survey of about 65% of all Jewish Americans are against these what's happening in Israel, and they support a two-state solution. And they wanted to see a de-escalation. There are 70 congressmen and women. I just checked it like half an hour ago. It reached 70 that they are signing a letter, at least, for President Biden, and there is a resolution that is being prepared in the Senate. It's more than a letter. A letter was sent by the 28 senators the other day. Now we're talking about a resolution, which is, much more important step.
And that, of course, that of course will go on the records and take the narrative forward into the future. But it seems from what you're saying that as well as sharpening the narrative, people beginning now to really see what is happening, seeing the truth, the facts of what is happening, rather than some PR that they've been sold by Israeli outlets, that they're really understanding the truth of what's going on there. But also that the level of ignorance, unfortunately, isn't just a general one. It's even specifically with amongst people who should know a lot better. People like the spokesman Ned Price, who accused Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of being anti-Semitic. Why did he come up with that? And what is the foundation of that, do you think?
Again, this goes back to the conflation argument that the Google employees wrote about. Anytime Israel is criticized, people are scared to be accused of being anti-Semitic. It's part of this cancel culture in the United States. So people need to understand that the criticizing Israel has nothing to do with being against Judaism or Jews. It's on the contrary. In my opinion, Israel should be a place where, in a country, and it's they're wonderful people, and they should set up a society that everyone enjoys their freedom as a first-class citizens. It's as simple as that. And it is not happening. That's what the Palestinians are saying. Now, these Israeli Arabs are saying, now that's new. It's a new voice that we see in a conflict like this. They're saying, okay, we are a full citizen of Israel. Now, I'm not talking about the people who live in Gaza or in West Bank. I'm talking about the folks who live in different places in Israel, in Israeli cities, and they're saying that we are second-class citizens. And there's even words of resemblance of apartheid regime in Israel, and this is a shame. It should not happen. Everyone should enjoy, first of all, a first-class citizen status to begin with, and at the same time, everybody should understand that we have a place called Gaza, which is extremely overpopulated, and they don't have infrastructure, they don't have clean water. It is among the worst conditions that humanity is suffering today, and this is within the realm of what they say is this wonderful so-called democratic country called Israel. Now, Israel is a wonderful place. The people are wonderful over there. There's nothing against that, but people need to realize that it is not to their benefit to continue like this, and they should bring in justice for everyone.
Absolutely, and then by giving rights to everyone, by loving everyone, then it brings peace. It's as simple as that. Bülent Yavuz, thank you so much for joining us today on The Edge. We ran out of time. Let's hope that comes sooner rather than later. Now, before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top story, shared with the hashtag #FreePalestine. So let's see what you say about Free Palestine on Twitter. Israel should stop the genocide of Muslims in the name of self-defense. What kind of defense is this? How on earth the bombing on civil population could be justified? And Bush says so many ex-soldiers in Israel talk about their traumas of killing innocent civilians, or about the torture and oppression they put Palestinians through. So many of them admitted that Israel is in fact a terrorist state. But the world doesn't want to hear that, of course. And Osama Dorias says, if you're tired of hearing about the plight of Palestinians, imagine how tired they are of being oppressed, displaced, murdered and vilified. You have to see put up with it sporadically for a few seconds. They've been living this reality for 73 years. Let's now take a look at our video of the day titled, "A Question from Palestine to the Whole World. Is this normal where you live?"
What is normal to you? In Palestine, normal is definitely not what you would expect. Normal is being a kid who loves to go to the beach and then never coming back. Normal is planning a trip to see the family, fearing that you'll not be able to survive the endless series of checkpoints. Normal is being part of a community and then watching your whole neighborhood fade away under ethnic cleansing. Normal's coming back from school just to find out your home is not there anymore. Normal is for you to be a child with big dreams, stuck in an open prison with no electricity, water or education. Normal is going for a walk and seeing nothing but large walls wherever you go. Almost wanting to pray, but being interrupted every time.
I'm always sick, I'm always, I don't know. I can't do anything. If you do all of this, what do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10.
Is this also normal where you live?
You know the truth, so speak up. And that's all from this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. Stay tuned as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on our top stories and a look beyond the edge.